How do we make games more immersive? That question has been at the heart of gaming since the early days. From the halcyon days of the arcade with machines that rock and tilt as you go, to the nascent era of 3D gaming, bringing us a whole new world of force feedback thanks to the mighty innovation of the Rumble Pack, to the modern era of motion sensing input devices like the Wii and Kinect, and the ultimate desire of true virtual reality. Video games have always been an escape from reality, but there's always been a fundamental desire to make that escape seem more real. Nintendo has always been a playground for experimentation, thanks in no small part to their humble beginnings as a playing card manufacturer. No doubt they were also spurred to push the envelope because of the gaming crash, and the push to market video game systems as toys in the US. From first-party hardware peripherals like Rob the Robot and the Power Pad, to more, how shall I put this delicately, functional hardware like the Advantage and the Zapper light gun. Even third parties got in on the action with the infamous Power Glove and U-Force, ostensibly designed for a more immersive experience. Nintendo has carried on this thirst for experimentation all through their history, with disastrous lows like the Virtual Boy to dizzying highs like the Wii and the Switch. Of course, we can't talk about Nintendo in the 80s without talking about Sega. Though not their first foray into home consoles, the Master System was Sega's first console to see widespread distribution outside of Japan. Though it never quite caught on in Japanese and US markets, sales were explosive in Europe and South America. In fact, new versions of the Master System are still being released in Brazil today. Sega needed something to set themselves apart. It would be several more years until the release of the Genesis and the birth of Sonic the Hedgehog, but Sega still needed to show consumers that they can do what Nintendo don't. The console wars had yet to start in earnest, but Sega was ready to fire a warning shot. Enter the SegaScope 3D glasses. Okay, so this probably wasn't meant to be some sort of NES killer, it was just a cool tech innovation. I'm just trying to weave a narrative here, okay? First released in the US in August of 1987 and rolling out to other markets later that year, SegaScope was the brainchild of Mark Cerny, a programmer and designer for Sega at the time. If his name rings a bell, it probably should. Prior to working for Sega, Cerny's first major breakout success was the arcade version of Marble Madness, which employed the use of a trackball for controlling the player character. Cerny would go on to found the Sega Technical Institute, an American development division of Sega who developed Sonic the Hedgehog 2, for which Cerny was the producer, Sonic Spinball and Comic Zone, as well as Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles. After leaving Sega and making various moves throughout the industry, including being instrumental in the development of the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro series, Cerny eventually formed his own company where he was a consultant for Insomniac, Naughty Dog, and Sony. He aided in developing a graphics engine for the PlayStation 2, and later helped implement some of the console's same functionality in the PS3, all the while aiding in the development and release of some of Insomniac and Naughty Dog's flagship franchises. The cherry on top? He was the lead designer for the PS4, PS Vita, and PS5 hardware. SegaScope 3D was Cerny's first hardware development project after the arcade version of Marble Madness. Cerny drew inspiration from Sega's earlier arcade title, Sub-Rock 3D, to bring 3D gaming into the home console market. Developed by Sega and Panasonic and released in 1982, Sub-Rock 3D is the earliest version of stereoscopic 3D used in a video game. The game featured an eyepiece shaped like a periscope pointed at the screen, which, incidentally, was one of the first uses of a 3D television. Inside the eyepiece were spinning discs, alternately covering either eye, so only one of two alternating images on screen were seen. This created the illusion of 3D, and would lay the groundwork for the SegaScope 3D. Like most 3D technologies, the glasses aren't truly 3D, which is to say moving around the image doesn't grant the viewer any additional information. It's not a hologram, it's a pair of glasses. When we talk about 3D, we're usually talking about a stereoscope. A stereoscope is any device that allows the viewer to perceive a pair of two-dimensional images as having depth. How we process 3D space relies largely on binocular vision, as each eye is receiving slightly different information to give us the full picture. Stereoscopes work on a similar principle, presenting two nearly identical images to the viewer with slightly different perspectives. The effect can be reproduced without the aid of a stereoscope by simply crossing your eyes. Remember the Magic Eye books from the 90s? Well, it's kinda like that, but instead of a single image blending together to create the illusion of depth, stereoscopes use two images side by side with slight differences, and the device does all the work. Now obviously stereoscopy isn't new technology. The earliest stereoscopes date to the 1830s, first described by Charles Whetstone and later improved by Sir David Brewster into a less bulky, more portable version, similar to how we see them today. On a consumer level, stereoscopes have been widely available since 1939, with the creation of the Viewmaster. Different versions of the toy and implementations of stereoscopes have existed throughout the years, eventually making its way into video games. So, what makes the SegaScope 3D so special, and why would I decide to talk about this piece of hardware specifically? Well, for one, these are the only ones that I ever owned. Like I said, the only ones I owned. I haven't had these since I was a kid, and they're currently going for $200 on the low end. And for another, though Vectrex's 3D glasses were released first, Sega's were the most prolific, seeing a worldwide release. Nintendo's own attempt at stereoscopic 3D glasses, the Famicom 3D system, released exclusively in Japan in October of 1987. Its limited success meant it never saw a release outside of Japan. The Vectrex 3D Imager only saw a release in the US, with only 3 games being produced during its lifespan. Perhaps the biggest problem with the Vectrex's glasses was how the 3D effect was created, with a spinning disc inside the device. This created an unintended gyroscopic effect that meant when a player turned their head, the disc tended to stay in place, and the 3D effect was nullified. Sega had a simple, elegant solution to this problem. Rather than a physical motorized shutter like in the Vectrex 3D Imager or in Subrock, the glasses house 2 small LCD screens, powered through the console itself. The glasses plug into the console through the card slot, which unfortunately means they can only be played on the original iteration of the Master System. Once the device is turned on and a compatible game starts, the magic begins. Without the glasses, what you'll see on screen looks like a flickering, glitchy image, but put the glasses on and boom, 3D. The flickering images on screen are actually 2 separate images, played back 1 frame at a time, i.e. frame 1 is the first image, frame 2 the second, frame 3 back to the first image, and so on and so on. The alternating images then sync up with the glasses. The glasses use what's called an active shutter 3D system. Basically, this means that the system openly presents the image intended for the left eye while blocking the right eye, then presenting the right eye image while blocking the left. When the odd frames are playing, the LCD screen over one eye darkens, leaving the other eye at full brightness. When the even frames are playing, the first LCD screen goes to full brightness and the second LCD screen darkens. Now this is all happening at an impossibly fast rate. Most of these games are running at an effective frame rate of 60 frames per second, which directly translates to how fast these LCD screens are turning off and back on. While they're not really turning off. Liquid crystal screens have a property of becoming dark when voltage is applied, so a small electric current is being applied to each eye 30 times per second on alternating frames. Now the one major drawback to this is that the frame rate of the games themselves are effectively halved. But are you really going to notice it with these 30-plus-year-old games? Probably not, unless you're extremely pedantic. If you focus on it and really try to see the change happening, this can look like screen stutter, but the average person isn't going to notice. There are burgeoning technologies that don't require the use of glasses, such as the Nintendo 3DS. Like with other active 3D systems, the 3DS worked by projecting 2 separate images from the same screen. It's essentially the same as active 3D systems we've already covered, but instead of requiring the user to wear glasses, the stereoscopic effect is achieved with a parallax barrier in front of the screen, allowing only certain pixels to reach each eye. This is why the player has to sit in a specific position and distance from the screen for the effect to work. Active 3D differs in a few key ways from passive 3D. I mean, the name alone should speak volumes. Where active 3D works by alternating 2 images in rapid succession, passive 3D has both images overlapping. When you think about 3D image, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For me, it's the old red and blue glasses that were popular in the 80s and early 90s, or 3D movies. These are both versions of passive 3D. In the case of the red-blue glasses, these are what's called anaglyph 3D. The image is split into 2 color-coded images, filtering 1 image to each eye. Because of the way our brains work, the image is fused into a 3-dimensional image. In the case of 3D movies, these typically use polarized 3D. Each lens has a filter applied and strips to it, typically 45 and 135 degree angles. Again, the image is projected as 2 overlapping images, this time matching the angle of the glasses so that each eye only sees 1 image. This does have the unintended side effect of causing image bleed if the viewer turns their head so much, which is why most 3D movies use circular polarized light. Basically, 1 image is projected clockwise and the other counterclockwise. And it's a little more complicated than that, but frankly, I'm not smart enough to understand it. There are a few other versions of passive 3D, but these are the most prominent, and I've already gone off topic enough as it is. Despite their best efforts to bring an immersive 3D gaming experience into the homes, the SegaScope 3D was a flop. Only 8 games in total were produced that supported the glasses. Outrun 3D, a slightly updated version of the original Master System conversion of Outrun, Poseidon Wars 3D, a sort of reimagining of Subrock 3D, Space Harrier 3D, a sequel to the Master System version of Space Harrier, Zaxxon 3D, a sequel to the arcade game Zaxxon, Line of Fire, a reimagining of the arcade game of the same name, and 3 entirely new games, Blade Eagle, Maze Hunter 3D, and Missile Defense 3D. Missile Defense 3D was unique in that it required both the 3D glasses and the Sega Light Phaser to play, as well as being the only one of these games to be programmed by Mark Cerny. The demand for an immersive 3D gaming experience has never gone away. Nintendo's false start with their own version of 3D glasses didn't discourage them from trying again in 1995 with the release of the now infamous Virtual Boy, and again in 2011 with the vastly more successful 3DS. Their later attempt at stereoscopic 3D came in the form of the Labo VR kit, boasting a handful of proof-of-concept demos, as well as limited support for games like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey. Even modern VR headsets like the PSVR, Oculus, and Vive still use a version of this technology, though much more sophisticated. The insides use an updated, more advanced version of the stereoscopic 3D that was used in the early days, but they attempt to bring the player further into the game with stereo audio, motion tracking, and a variety of other advanced techniques. We're probably still a few years away from true 3D experience, but the desire to be a part of a virtual world isn't going anywhere soon. Well, that's all that I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, do please give it a like and leave a comment down below with your thoughts, and feel free to share it with a friend who you think might enjoy this topic about the SegaScope 3D glasses. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Until then, as always, keep playing.